Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IEA's webinar on the role of energy efficiency in COVID stimulus packages. The IEA's energy efficiency team and I hope that you and your family are well during this difficult period. We're so pleased with the positive response we've received to this important topic, and we're glad that so many of you have joined us today. We're expecting a full house of approximately 1,000 participants from 120 countries on the line. Before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. First, as this is a GoToWebinar, all participant microphones are automatically muted, but you should feel free to send the team a message or a question in the chat box. Second, the webinar will be recorded, so if you find the discussion today valuable, you will be able to revisit it on your own on our website or share it with your colleagues. Today, we will be hearing from several experts across the energy industry. First, Dr. Brian Motherway, head of the IEA's Energy Efficiency Division, will share some brief thoughts on the IEA's perspectives and research on this important topic. We will then hear from our featured speakers. First up, Dr. Josué Tanaka from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Dr. Tanaka is the Managing Director responsible for operational strategy and planning at the EBRD and for leading the bank's energy efficiency and climate change activities. We will then hear from Ingrid Reumert of the Velux Group, where she is the Vice President of Global Communications, Sustainability, and Public Affairs. After Ingrid, we'll hear from Dr. Andrew McAllister, who is a two-term commissioner for the California Energy Commission. And finally, Kathleen Gaffney, a senior program manager and head of the analytics team within the IEA's Energy Efficiency Division, will moderate a Q&A session with our panelists. Please feel free to submit questions to the panelists through the chat box. Thank you again for joining us today. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Motherway.
Alyssa, thank you very much, and thank you to so many people from so many countries around the world joining us today. We're very pleased that you're showing this interest in this topic, and we know this topic is of interest to very many people, and we're very pleased to be facilitating this discussion today with three really great panelists that are going to bring a lot of insights from different perspectives into this important topic. And again, as Alyssa has started by saying, first of all, we wish you all well. We hope that all of you in these difficult times are in good health and in good spirits. And we know, of course, that all of us as societies and governments are focused first and foremost on the health of people, which is exactly how it should be. But of course, the economic crisis that is emerging from the situation is on everybody's minds also. And the need to restart economies through stimulus programs of various kinds is something that we in the IEA are discussing with governments all around the world. And we hope to make various contributions, including this event, and also putting the power of our global analysis at the use of governments and societies to help make the decisions that will be necessary in the coming weeks and months. And for the latest analysis, you can find it on our website, on our COVID-19 hub, at the website shown on the screen now. Among the recent events we have held, just last week, we co-hosted between the IEA and the country of Denmark a global ministerial roundtable on economic recovery through investments in clean energy that focused on energy efficiency and renewable energy as opportunities for economic stimulus, as well as pursuing our global clean energy goals. And so that discussion will feed into a special report of the World Energy Outlook, which will be published in mid-June, that will look at opportunities in key sectors, not least energy efficiency, where clean energy goals and economic stimulus goals align well, and where job creation and economic growth opportunities exist in all sectors in energy efficiency. In parallel with that, some of you will be aware that the IEA for the past year has been working with the Global Commission for Urgent Action on Energy Efficiency that we set up to look at how to accelerate progress on energy efficiency through better policy. And of course, its work could not be more timely, and the stress on urgent action could not be more appropriate than now. And this commission will publish its results in June at a major event that we'll be announcing soon. And so please look out for that event coming shortly. In terms of the themes of the discussion, of course, everybody on this webinar, I think, will agree that energy efficiency has the potential to create jobs in key sectors, including construction, manufacturing, and others. But of course, at the same time, improves competitiveness, reduces greenhouse gas and local air pollution emissions, and lowers everyone's energy bills. These kind of benefits of energy efficiency have never been more important than today in the current context. But While governments understand those principles, the questions they ask of us is, well, how do I actually really make that happen in practice? What kind of policies and programs can I put in place that will really deliver for energy efficiency and that will really help me achieve, first and foremost, my stimulus goals, and secondly, my clean energy goals? And that's why we have been exploring with governments themes that we will discuss today, such as how ambition can be raised both in scale but also in urgency, and how energy efficiency actions can deliver impacts quickly, but also effectively. How can the kind of actions we take now not just deliver immediate goals, but also focus on our long-term goals? They can build quality markets of energy efficiency, they can build demand for energy efficiency technologies and services, and of course they can avoid lock-in, avoiding building inefficient buildings, unsmart infrastructure, or the deployment of inefficient or inappropriate technologies such as cars, appliances, and everything else that's going to be part of economic stimulus. So all of these questions are very much on government's minds. They're looking for advice and solutions, and the speakers you'll hear from today are very much at the cutting edge and cold face of those and the that are necessary. So I think you're going to enjoy the discussion that takes place, and I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague Kathleen to introduce our speakers. Kathleen.
And thank you, of course, for this opportunity here to talk about this very important topic of energy efficiency and how energy efficiency can play a role in not only a recovery, but of course a green recovery here, both short-term and long-term after the hopefully get out of the COVID crisis. And I wanted to start with highlighting what you would call the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. And I had actually on the slide the very nice, you could say, flower or figure that the IEA did back in 2014, I believe it was, when you did you published a study or a publication around the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. And oh, there it is, beautiful. And as you can see, you were actually first with the color scheme of the UN SDGs, even before the UN was. So a beautiful model. But my point here is that, of course, having worked with energy efficiency over quite some years now, it's just fantastic to see how suddenly the different arguments that we have used over the past to try to lift the agenda of energy efficiency suddenly has a much wider audience, and that decision makers who has previously maybe not been so interested have suddenly got, open ears. And as you can see here in this figure, there is a number of benefits to energy efficiency improvements, both of course within buildings, within the industry, etc. And I think given the time that we are in, there is a specific point in trying to direct attention towards some of the other benefits than the direct energy savings that we normally, of course, talk about. So, and definitely, of course, the jobs angle almost goes without saying that's extremely important. And we know in Europe, the construction sector is around 10%, 9-10% of the European GDP. We also know that around 90% of the companies in the European construction sector are actually SMEs with less than 10 employees. So also to be able to keep the you could say the bottom, or to ensure that the recovery, the construction sector is important in terms of jobs creation. And of course, the second the multiple benefit, or second benefit here I would point at, is the health and the social benefits, because of course there's absolutely no doubt that health as a theme is of course extremely, and rightly so, extremely high on the agenda for all governments and everyone, of course. And I also think here it will be important for us to point out the benefits that you can get in terms of health, other social benefits, in terms of when you improve the energy efficiency of buildings. And we do know we spend 90% of our time indoors, and some of us almost 100% of our time indoors these last few weeks. So I think will be an increasing awareness of what does it mean, what impact do buildings have on our health and well-being, that is important to lift as part of an energy efficiency agenda, and there's extensive research showing that. So I think that would be my first point, how important it is to try to highlight some of the other benefits that there is around energy efficiency, and then some of them are, of course, very immediate and can have an immediate effect, stimulating the economy. Then clicking on to the next slide, Alyssa, if you could do that, if that works. Yes, just a few points around the EU before I will go into what we have been doing in my home country, Denmark, but just a few points around Europe. And of course, as you all know, there is a large discussion going on in the European Union also, that how can you make the recovery that is needed, not just a economic recovery, but a recovery which is both good for our economy, but also, of course, supports the green transition that we would like to do as a continent, and where the European Green Deal has set out that we should be a climate neutral continent in 2050. And then there, I think, of course, it's extremely important that we push forward with the ideas that the plan that there is in the Green Deal. I know that there has been already some communication about which part of the Green Deal will be delayed. And I think that that's a strong point in that, saying that there's already been developed here some ideas for a new, you could say, policy framework initiative taking us towards the green transition, and of course we should continue with those ideas. And then also here, I think when we talk about the green recovery on EU level, it's of course important that that also there we think about the multiple benefits in terms of jobs creation, climate change, mitigation, etc., but also again the health and well-being of our people. And there, of course, the construction sector has got an important part to play, especially if we can get the renovation wave going, which is a part of the Green Deal, or one of the flagships of the Green Deal. And I have noted that it seems like that is not going to put on hold, not going to be delayed, and that of course makes sense, because as you know, construction industry is great at creating activity in the economy fast, and also of course what's fantastic about buildings is that they don't move, so it's local jobs, and can also help on youth unemployment, etc. And then I think there is also a key point in that all the existing legislation that has been passed through Parliament and has already been agreed, that we get it implemented. And there's a lot of directives still waiting to be implemented that has been agreed. And of course, close to my heart, or our heart in Velux, is the EPBD, which is the Buildings Directive. I think is only a handful of European companies, member states that have met the deadline here in March with implementation. But I would like to just spend a few minutes before I finish on what we have done in Denmark. So if you could go on to that next my final slide. In Denmark, the Danish government has set out, or did before the corona crisis, set out an ambitious CO2 reduction target of 70% by 2030. So it's quite ambitious. And they had already started a big piece of work in trying to make the plans for that. Very concretely, they divided the climate path of Denmark as a country into 13 different sectorial plans, and put a large initiative in place where there has been 13 different climate partnerships consisting mainly of business leaders, businesses, but also of organizations who have drawn up roadmaps for each of these sectors. There has been also a climate partnership for the built environment, and I had the pleasure to be vice chair of that work that we did from November until March. Unfortunately, we couldn't do the proper launch because of the COVID crisis. But my point here is that that here there was already had been you can see some developed plans that we had actually spent some time on, that was based on facts, experience, and also, of course, business knowledge. And those are the ones that we have tried, where we have tried to dig out some points to put forward to the government now for implementation. And of course, we have come out with a number of recommendations to the government, and the government has actually taken quite a lot of it on board already. I think the first point was that the building industry was exempted from the lockdown that we've had, so craftsmen have been able to work during this entire corona crisis. As I know that's been different from country to country. So there has been activity within the construction industry during the entire corona crisis. But a few other examples, what we have put forward and what has already been agreed by the government is very close to in the process of being finalized. Proposal around looking at the social housing sector that has been very well received. And I think the reason for this positive reception of that by the government is also that it exactly ticks several of the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, because working with renovation of social housing, of course, it's around job creation, it's around energy efficiency, lowering energy bills, but it's also very much about health and well-being of some of our more vulnerable people who live in social housing communities. So that part has been very well received. We've worked with tax deduction that has supported local craftsmen. That will also be prolonged. There has been a cap on investments in infrastructure projects locally and regionally for quite a while. That cap has been lifted. The reason it was there was that there has been concerns around overheating of the economy. So that cap has been lifted now. There has also been a great cooperation set up between some, you could say, the larger private pension funds and the public sector, trying to get some of those savings that are in the pension funds out and work for the economy, and specifically here to create more sustainable buildings and energy efficiency. There's also been looking at what triggers could you have for the end users. And then I think a point in itself is to look at other initiatives also, which has a relatively lower costs, which can have an effect on making an environment for end users where they would like to invest in their homes. So that could be around improving the energy performance certificates of their buildings, including health, indoor climate, other benefits, capacity building around craftsmen, etc., etc. So these are just a few of the points that we have gotten through. But maybe just to close off, if I should conclude very fast on this, shortly on this, I believe that the multiple benefits approach is more relevant than ever. And then I think what's important, and also there's some learnings there after the crisis in 2009, if there is already a good green plan, which also delivers jobs and growth, stick to it, or at least take out the initiatives that can stimulate the economy from that. And then I think definitely use the existing structures that are already in place in society, instead of inventing all sorts of new schemes, because we know that bureaucracy takes over and it takes time to get them out there working. So I think that was it from my side to start with, and I will of course be happy to take any kind of questions. Thank you very much for now.
Great, thank you, Ingrid. Just to make sure you can hear me, this is Kathleen.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
yes.
Good. Thank you. I came back sort of in the beginning of your presentation, and apologies to everyone for that glitch. But hopefully we've got our panelists back on the line. So with that, I just want to make sure we can get to everyone, and I'll follow up with some questions for you after we hear from the other two panelists. But I really just wanted to remark, I like the message you just gave us. You know, stick to the plan, assuming there is one, with a focus on some of the short-term initiatives, and use the existing mechanisms that are already in place and working to deliver and deploy. So I think that's a great theme to keep in mind as we go through the rest of the thoughts from the other panelists. Okay, without further ado, then, Josué, I hope you can hear me, and I hope you're ready to go. We'll hear from you next.
Yes. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. So look, first, thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this webinar, and thank you, IEA, for keeping the energy efficiency flag up in these difficult times. I really think that your intellectual leadership is key, as reflected, in the enhanced visibility which you give to energy efficiency in good times, and now, may I say, perhaps in more challenging times. Before addressing specifically the topic of energy efficiency financing within the next couple of years, let me provide just very quickly a short background on where we are coming from at EBRD on energy efficiency. First, I think to mention that reflecting the situation and the opportunities that we had in our original countries of operation in Central and Eastern Europe, the EBRD is, in a way, has become a kind of specialist energy efficiency financing bank. And so over the last 15 years, we've developed quite a broad range of energy efficiency finance products specific to individual sectors, going from buildings to urban infrastructure, and then also from small and large industry to rail or to energy networks. And as a result, energy efficiency has represented for us about 1/3 of our total investment. So in money terms, between $3 and $3.5 billion per year. So that's essentially where we are coming from at this moment when, COVID-19 hits the world, and you ask us, or you ask me to give a few thoughts about energy efficiency financing going forward. So I think, the note and the think piece that's been produced by the IEA is quite clear on the relevance of energy efficiency in a crisis recovery approach. So I will not go into that. But the question is, and may I say, the eternal question for energy efficiency remains then how to ensure and how to accelerate its deployment. So I could say that in good times, this is already a challenge. And we found, quite a number of ways to do this by expanding the range of energy efficiency financing channels, working directly, for example, with large energy intensive industries, with non-sovereign loans and equity, with cities and local and national utilities, with non-sovereign public finance instruments, with private banks and leasing companies, and also with national governments supporting energy efficiency programs with sovereign loans. Now, looking forward in the current situation to the question of energy efficiency finance, and looking at it from, I would say, today, in the situation we are, to the medium term, I think it's useful perhaps to distinguish three economic phases going forward. The current one, which is essentially rescue or survival and rescue, if I could put it that way. Stimulus, which is a bit, the title of the webinar today. And, the new dawn, growth and recovery in the third phase. For today, I'll just focus on the first two, because, the third one, I hope we have another webinar in better situation to focus on that one. So starting with the rescue phase, what can we do? The focus as a development bank has really been at this stage very much on helping our clients and our countries to confront, the immediate impact of lockdowns. So again, as a financing institution, this has mostly included the provision of liquidity with the scope, where we can, of supporting energy efficiency measures, but very often I have to say this is, the scope for doing that been limited. Where possible, we're seeking to ensure that the energy efficiency activities of our clients remain on course, and that capital expenditure programs that we were financing, that their implementation can proceed. It's also important to ensure that there is no backsliding in terms of the energy efficiency objectives and standards of our current operations and clients. And we are considering the extent to which governments could include, in certain cases, commitments on energy efficiency for companies which are or will be receiving government support. I note that this was a point that was also in the note in the think piece prepared by the IEA. So in the rescue phase, I would say it's challenging, worth trying, but to a large extent, probably we ought to focus most of our efforts today on the definition of what energy efficiency can be in the design on stimulus plans that will be coming. By coincidence, because sometimes there is also coincidence in life, the BRD is currently preparing its medium-term operational approach on the environment and climate finance. So, in fact, it's a perfect timing to define our role of, in financing energy efficiency in the stimulus. So, given the time available, I will focus really on a couple of energy efficiency finance instruments this afternoon. So first, let me focus on energy efficiency credit lines, which we run through banks in our countries of operation, because they provide and have provided a very effective channel of finance for small and medium energy efficiency projects. We have by now a network of over 150 banks which fulfill this intermediation function, and they finance essentially thousands of energy efficiency loans in buildings, in houses, in SMEs, protecting, like Ingrid mentioned, jobs and promoting economic activity. In certain cases, we're also working through banks to finance cities in terms of their energy efficiency investments. Because speed is of the essence in a recovery phase, it's important to have practical tools with which to accelerate eligibility and the provision of finance, while reducing processing costs to financial intermediaries. So that's the reason the BRD, for example, developed what we call the technology selector, which is a way to identify ahead high energy efficiency equipment, with high energy efficiency ratings, which can be eligible for financing under the facilities. Technology selectors are country specific. They take into account local conditions and supply chain. And again, their great advantage is they can accelerate deployment, which more than ever will be a key element of any stimulus package. A financing instrument which also is growing significantly at the moment is trade finance. The BRD is a pioneer in this area, launching a green trade facilitation product which includes support to the trade of energy efficiency equipment. This is another channel which can contribute to the recovery phase, with benefits for both exporting and importing parties. Here, with apologies, I cannot resist to inform everybody that we have actually just received news last night that the BRD received the Global Award of the Global Trade Review for the contribution of this particular instrument to sustainability. So in closing, I think it's important to acknowledge the significant level of uncertainty ahead of us. This raises a number of important questions which may affect the type and effectiveness of particular energy efficiency financing instruments. For today and for this seminar, perhaps just 4 questions for consideration, not to be, if I could say, overwhelming. First one, a lot of emphasis has been placed in recent years on the mobilization of the private sector in energy efficiency finance. So the first question here is, can this be sustained? And do we think that there could be a balance towards the public sector in the context of these stimulus programs? Second question is, what is the impact of the current health crisis on the banking systems of our countries of operations? And to which extent will we be able to pursue an aggressive expansion of energy efficiency financing, particularly if the banking systems confront themselves difficult situations? Third question, what will be the impact of the fall in energy prices on the demand for energy efficiency financing? We all know that, you know, the IRR of an energy efficiency project is very much based on those energy prices. And finally, to which extent do we think that governments will embed energy efficiency considerations in the design of their recovery plans? And I think there the advice of the IEA will play a big role, reflecting, you know, past experience and current expertise. So in closing, here we are with ideas, opportunities, and uncertainty. And I think, you know, going forward, we have to be adaptable, innovative, if I could say, and determined in developing energy efficiency financing products and rolling them out. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Josué. This is Kathleen. Unfortunately, I believe Andrew has called back using a phone number that we can't see and therefore can't unmute. So I'm going to ask Andrew if he could to try to reconnect using the link that he was sent as a panelist. I apologize to everyone for these technical difficulties, but we won't be able to turn the mic over to Andrew until, yeah, we can see him basically. So
are you sure you cannot hear me?
There you are.
Hey,
I can hear
you.
That was even better, to just create a moment of panic and then you appear.
Oh,
great.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Well, I did call back.
So,
great.
So we can hear you and the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks a lot. Yeah, these technical difficulties are a real thing. So obviously we have some work to do on that as well. Here I am in California near Silicon Valley, right? So thanks a lot, Brian and Kathleen and everyone for your attention. I did not have slides, so I think this should be fine as long as my cell connection is good. So certainly wanted to just open with empathy and appreciation for all of the strain and stress that people are going through. Certainly our first line providers and healthcare workers. Pretty amazing situation we're going through, particularly in the US, obviously. And so I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge that. You know, obviously this is not the way we would have wanted to see how a lower carbon world would operate, but you know, I think there are great opportunities to take the silver linings here and move them to the fore as the economy opens up again. And I just wanted to describe a couple of ways, a few ways we might try to do that. You know, try to get the funds out there fast and really have an enhancing effect on our collective resilience for the long term. At the same time, we really focus on the near term jobs and other positive near-term impacts of these efforts. So I wanted to just speak generally to the big energy efficiency ideas for national stimulus, a sort of a US perspective on that, and then give just a couple brief examples of relevant programs in California, and then finally just share a couple of guiding thoughts. So I think in large measure, this will echo Ingrid and Josué's comments and Brian's at the beginning, but give it a little bit of a California and US twist. So, you know, in the US, we had the experience of the 2008 recession and stimulus. And so I think we learned a lot of lessons. I was in a different role then, kind of organizing on a regional level, many of the initiatives that were coming down from the federal government. And I think that perspective helps a lot in being able to figure out how not to repeat the mistakes that were sort of built in at that time. You know, honest ones, but certainly we need to be a little more facile with how we get those funds out and get them out quickly and effectively. And then also, you know, take the good parts, which were huge. I mean, it had a massive impact, the stimulus in 2008. And actually, we still have some of those funds floating around doing good things. So I think we want to, you know, learn from that. So So nationally, I think there are a few ideas that have traction, and it's really positive. In particular, we have the State Energy Program and the Weatherization Assistance Program that collectively get roughly $350 million a year. Those could be scaled by many multiples. The states have, in the U.S. where we have a federal system, the states have priorities already. They have channels for financing. Certainly in California, that's the case. We have, we push out billions of dollars. I won't say routinely, but we certainly have the program infrastructure to do that. In many states, New York and other large states certainly have the ability to push out to channel, large federal stimulus initiatives. The initiative that seems that's forming in the national discussion that I think is very positive is around critical state and local public facilities. Now, this is about infrastructure renewal, resilience, emergency preparedness, all of those things, and really focused on critical facilities. So that would be, water treatment, shelters, the municipal university, schools, and healthcare marketplace, or MUSH as we call it, and really focused on health and safety, resiliency, IT infrastructure, cybersecurity. Many of these investments, emergency response capabilities, many of these investments are co-benefits and not strictly energy related, but they have all of these follow-on benefits. So important to be smart, with the pay for these initiatives. And then Josué talked about financing, but certainly public-private partnerships, performance-based contracts, and energy as a service. Lots of vehicles to fund these efforts and really get multiples from the federal or the state stimulus funding. So, we can multiply the stimulus by fourfold or so by leveraging private capital with the security that the sort of public funding provides. This approach to really focus on critical facilities, it creates jobs, obviously near-term job creation, long-term mission critical public buildings resilience and reduced emissions, along with improved air quality, which we're seeing very clearly in many areas in the U.S. So fingers crossed on that conversation in Washington, D.C. Again, we have existing program infrastructure to provide incentives, say the traditional rebate approach, but really that needs to be updated to include many of the things that have been mentioned, the resilience, the IT infrastructure, load flexibility, grid resilience, all of those things that energy efficiency now, as we think about it more as active efficiency, all of those digitization functionalities need to be explicitly included in the investment going forward. That has implications for how the jobs landscape develops and also the project landscape itself. And so I think that's really critical to get that 2 for, 3 for, or 4 for as we invest in hardware and in infrastructure and projects on the ground, shovel ready. We apply all the technologies that are going to be relevant going forward for decades in the management optimization and the cost reduction or cost optimization of the grid investment that we need to make as we electrify and decarbonize. And then the final initiative I would say would be EV infrastructure. I think it might have been mentioned already, but that comes along with all of these, with this whole package of efficiency along with resilience and load flexibility. And again, there are lots of co-benefits there. And in California, we have a few programs. I guess I'll just gloss over those, but we've pushed out over the last 5 years or so more than $2 billion to schools, to local governments, to many of the facilities that I've mentioned, both as grants and as low interest and no interest loans. And so I think particularly schools and local facilities, government facilities, state and local government facilities are areas where, certainly our schools are going to be empty for a while. They have collectively, schools and local governments, probably $1 trillion of nationwide of deferred maintenance that could be targeted while these facilities are lightly used or vacant. And so that's a huge opportunity to get people back to work in the near term. And then, so I have a few suggestions, actually, just guidelines, I guess. We can be prepared for these kinds of things going forward. And I guess, I feel like we're partway there now for this crisis, which is great. But really a few guidelines for, in the long term, getting prepared and being more resilient generally for these kinds of challenges. So we really do need to include resilience investments in our initiatives, storage, load flexibility, other distributed energy resources. Fire resilience in California and across the world really is a huge investment need, and really leverage these programs to make sure that the technologies that are financed and subsidized have these capabilities. You know, that's a muscular way to do policy, and it's really necessary to move the needle of the market towards active efficiency. Know your building stock. You know, benchmarking programs, really digging in. Where are the low-income people? Where are those multifamily buildings that are eligible? You know, the schools program that we've had in California for a few years, we've pushed out $1.7 billion over 5 years, and the schools have a backlog of projects that program has really kind of forced them to put together. So as we get more funding, say federal stimulus or other, there's a clear bucket list, there's a clear project list, shovel-ready, near-term jobs. So I think you know, that is a great resource to have in this moment, and it's got a real heavy equity focus. So I think you know, all over the world we're concerned about equity. Certainly in California, 35% of the customer base is low income. They're not going to be able to pay for this themselves. So if we don't bring them along, we're not going to succeed in our decarbonization goals. We're certainly not going to succeed in our energy efficiency goals. So we have to have an equity focus. And then just a final note on jobs. The U.S. Energy and Employment Report came out a couple months ago, and it shows that there are 3.3 million clean energy jobs, which is almost half of the overall energy sector jobs in the U.S. And those clean energy jobs are over 2% of the national workforce. And so, you know, 3.3 million clean energy jobs is a lot. Well, actually, I will say with a caveat, that's before the COVID. So we've lost 15% of those jobs or so, we think, already. So that's a level set. And we could, you know, with the stimulus, we can get back to that. And, you know, why not set ambitious goals to double or triple that over the next 10 years and really have a vision of getting into these buildings, improving quality of life, getting all the co-benefits that I and others have mentioned here today, and then, you know, really focus on that long-term resilience for the country. So both near-term and long-term, if we set our targets right and we invest in the right places to really grow that sector. You know, imagine just good quality contractors in all of our homes and businesses over the next 10 years to invest in energy optimization and energy efficiency. It's pretty compelling. And those are great jobs that can't be exported. So I think that has traction politically, and the politics of this are supremely important. We've got to be able to check a lot of boxes in this discussion and get money where people can use it for jobs. So with that, I will just wrap up, and thanks for the opportunity.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And your preparedness guidelines are really a good starter, because we're out at the top of the hour, but I think and we'll probably lose some people, but if it's okay with our panelists, I'll stay on, I'll keep it going for another 10 minutes so we can get at least one round of Q&A with you. And your point about preparedness made me think of this question. I had wanted to ask all three of you, you know, what do you see as the key differences between in the last 10 years? Not so much between the crises themselves, but like, where were we as an energy efficiency industry 10 years ago, and where are we now? And with what we are facing in terms of recovery, how can we leverage the advancements or the policy progress or the improvements in the supply chain, the reduction in risk and performance uncertainty? How can we leverage all the things that we've acquired over the last 10 years as an industry to really make a big shift in where we go next? You know, it won't do for us to just pick up where we left, to get back to normal and then pick up where we left off. We really do need to capitalize on all those changes in the last 10 years and leapfrog. And so some of the things you mentioned about resilience and the ability to know your building stock through smart meters and other resources while keeping an eye on equity. I mean, these are things we can do now, but we couldn't possibly have done them 10 years ago as well. And so key policies can be put into place to take advantage of that. So I'll let you go at the end, Andrew, since those were your thoughts. Maybe you'll come up with a few others, but I wanted to point to Ingrid and Josué. And, you know, Josué mentioned a lot of different financing mechanisms what has changed in the last 10 years to allow some of those to come to be, and what are some more innovations that we can expect in the financing side of things to leverage more private sector finance and others. And then Ingrid, from the industry's perspective, where do you see some major changes and shifts happening that we can kind of jump off from and establish in some of these new policies that might come out as part of a recovery plan? So why don't I start with you, Josué, and then Ingrid will give you some time to think about that question. So Josué, do you see anything there that you can jump on?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, if we see these last 10 years, and again, not to give too long an answer and just focus on one product, I referred to the role of commercial banks in financing energy efficiency. And, if you take where we were 10 years ago, our network was probably 20 or 30 banks that we were working with, many of which, obviously had quite a hit, following the financial crisis. But, you look today, at least as we entered into the current situation, we have a network now of something like 150 banks plus in the countries in which we work. So that's, I would say, a great base to work with. Now, remember a bit, some of the questions that I asked at the end, because obviously at this stage, we don't know yet, what the impact of the current crisis is going to be on the banking system. But at least, one thing that we don't need to restart is explaining what energy efficiency is to these 150 plus commercial banks. Number two, they by now have developed their own portfolios. They have experience with this, with their clients. They have demand, for their clients. So these are all great things to build on. And that's what, we are thinking in a way right now at the moment, to first and foremost, obviously maintain, and hopefully, not have, what I called, kind of a backsliding. And number two, if we manage to maintain, in other words, if there isn't a big impact on the banking system in our countries, then obviously, to connect the energy efficiency opportunity to actually accelerate and take very much the points that Andrew mentioned, in terms of pushing forward things in which the combination of public stimulus money with private can do to accelerate, for example, buildings energy efficiency improvements. So that would be a bit, an answer only on one product. There could be many others, but I don't want to be too long.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, it's good to hear from you. The preparedness of the commercial or private sector finance community and how we can leverage that. Like you say, as long as we can come out of it, as reasonably well, then we should be able to jumpstart some of that. So good. How about you, Ingrid? Do you have any quick ideas that come to mind in terms of how to move things forward differently?
Yes, but I think we are definitely in a completely different place than after the crisis in 2009. The maturity level in terms of our policy environment and our policy instruments is just much higher. And just during the previous European Commission, we passed the huge energy union. A large legislative package was passed through, and now there's a follow-up with the Green Deal. So I think we don't need to start from zero explaining why is energy efficiency important, how is it linked to climate change, how is it linked to multiple benefits. I think that there is a completely different level of understanding. And then in the industry side, I think the solutions definitely for the built environment, to make the built environment carbon neutral, the solutions are there. So also there, we have the toolbox. It's a question of getting it going. And then I think maybe one key thing that would make it different is also that the sustainability agenda, so wider than energy efficiency, is stronger than before. And there we know also large companies will look increasingly at their value chain and what is called the scope 3. Take the scope 3 responsibilities much more seriously, and also from that angle, I think we will see an increasing pressure and wish to uptake for an uptake of energy efficiency measures within industry. So I'm very optimistic, and I think we're definitely in a different place.
Yeah, definitely. So Andrew, I'll turn it over to you real quick, but can you react to something that Ingrid said in terms of we really are in a different place in terms of the maturity of the policy environment? I mean, she spoke mainly about Europe, but I think the same would be said about California and some other parts of the U.S. So
Yeah,
how can we really, but yet we're still not seeing the action that we need. So how do we go from having really good policy to, almost a paradigm shift in the acceleration of some of the outcomes we need?
Yeah, so I would echo much of what's been said. You can hear me, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. So I would agree that we are in a much more mature place, and I think part of that, the two reasons. One is that we're really truly fully in the digital age now. So we have tools that we just did not have 10 years ago, just to manage, energy and understand energy. The second trend in the U.S. at least is decentralization. Certainly in California, the distribution grid is much more the thing now than it used to be. And so energy efficiency as a broader resource for the grid, as a reliability resource, as a real tool, active efficiency, load flexibility, I think is a new paradigm. It really is. And so I think all that is incredibly positive. I do have concerns though that energy efficiency as a relatively sort of complicated resource in the context of the grid compared to say energy storage or, solar, renewables, this sort of more traditional generation, even though it's clean, does kind of run the risk of getting lost in the mix. It's more, but I think that building optimization and focusing on the built environment and the quality of the built environment for actual human beings is really a key concept that we, yes, people understand more and it's a more sophisticated market, but I think we really have to keep beating that drum because the co-benefits, I think, are still underappreciated. I think as a local government phenomenon and as a resilience phenomenon is what's going to let us scale. Lay people aren't focusing on energy efficiency per se. They're focusing on the quality of their lives and their day-to-day, being, their existence. And so the value proposition has to fit that. And I think that is uniquely a set of topics that lends itself to local government. So the challenge is administering these, large programs from the federal and the state level that really do touch the right notes at the local level and work with local governments. And if we can do that, I am hugely optimistic that the right priorities will be applied in the right places and focus on, the low income, multifamily, all of these critical infrastructures, that I mentioned before, and really get the job done in a quality way.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to bring back the quality of life, quality of the built environment. It's a good way to bring that back in, to sort of reinvigorate that part of the value proposition. And even though some of you, I think you've all said, we don't have to convince people, of energy efficiency's value in the co-benefit sense of the word. We do have this unique opportunity right now to be more relevant and to resonate more when we talk about energy efficiency's role in things like improving the quality of the built environment or well-being, as well as all the economic benefits. So even though I think it's true, we don't have as hard of a job, convincing people as we might have 10 years ago. I think we have a great opportunity here. And that's why some of our work is to sort of the work we've done in the past on multiple benefits, and so has the likes of Velux and others, will continue and probably be even more prevalent as we, think about the role of efficiency through the recovery phase. Okay, well, I promised we would only go 10 more minutes just to keep it short and make sure we at least had one round of Q&A. I think there definitely were a lot of questions coming through the chat, and there were definitely some questions that came in through the registration process. So what I'll suggest, and I'll talk to the panelists after, we might be able to prepare some, responses, some written responses to some of the questions since we didn't have enough time for Q&A, and we'll share that back, with the sort of recording of this webinar and you know, some of the and the outcomes that we had. So look for an update from us probably through the website, but we'll send an email announcing it all. But anyway, I guess I'll just take this opportunity once again to thank all three panelists, Ingrid, Andrew, and Josué. Really, really appreciate your patience and persevering with the technical issues. And you know, we'll be able to compile a good recording of this discussion and hopefully respond to some of the Q&A. But again, thanks for your time, and thanks to everyone who dialed in and stayed with us. And look for more along these lines coming from us soon. So with that, I'll end the webinar and wish everybody a good day, a good afternoon, or a good evening, and stay healthy and safe. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.